Applied Kinesiology Session 7, Dr. Gary Dombey. We're continuing on here with our AK perspective on allergies. And we're going to talk mainly about allergies as it relates to the gut and digestion. Pollen and various commonly discussed antigens don't necessarily cause allergies, they cause a reaction by our immune system, and that's what we experience. More often, it's a problem with our immune system's capacity for incrementally managing these various antigens without putting the body into major stress. So one of the key things to look at is from our perspective, and I know from kind of a functional medicine type and naturopathic model as well, we look at stomach dysfunction. Hypochlorhydria is a huge cause of allergy problems and largely overlooked because of the fact that allergies technically are the immune system's reaction to a protein. Proteins are, for the most part, digested in the stomach. 80% of protein breakdown is in the stomach from the pepsin that is created in the stomach when everything's working well. This breaks peptide bonds, and a lot of proteins that we ingest that may potentially become problems down the line, if they're properly broken down in the stomach, they lose their ability to trigger our immune system. Dairy is a good example. Gluten can be an example of that. That's one of the main reasons that we tend to experience more allergy problems a lot of times as we get older. When we're younger, our digestive system is vibrant and functioning optimally, and we basically break down these proteins. They don't have a chance to go farther down into the gut and trigger immunity. Hypochlorhydria is a very common problem. I find it all the time. Some of my biggest hits in practice have been with patients with all they really need is just an additional, they need some dietary changes, but also some hydrochloric acid and some zinc. Leaky gut syndrome, I won't get into there's so much stuff out there written on leaky gut, but leaky gut syndrome, I mean, if you have allergies and you have leaky gut syndrome, you've got to address the gut. Adrenal dysfunction, obviously. Thrown in here, deep tendon reflex test. This is we could add a whole bunch of AK tests that would be good for determining if the allergies are a potential problem. The deep tendon reflex test is one of them. And then C3L3, well, that's the vertebral subluxation and lovett C3L3 that's associated with open ileocecal valve. Mainstream healthcare tends to use the pathways that our body has established, like epinephrine is something that we produce to help squelch the effects of allergies. This is the pathway that inhalers use. They use a synthetic type of epinephrine. Now you can see in this slide the nutrients that you want to consider when you think maybe your epinephrine levels are too low, and that's often the case with adrenal fatigue or adrenal imbalance. A lot of times there's not enough epinephrine being secreted at the right moment. So C, copper, tyrosinase, important precursors for making epinephrine and norepinephrine. Of course, B3, 6, folate. Also methyl donors and B12 to convert from norepinephrine to epinephrine. Epinephrine is like a much stronger version of norepinephrine. On the other hand, prednisone, which is used for all kinds of inflammatory problems is utilizing the cortisol pathway. So this is the adrenal cortex pathway. This is how we make all of our reproductive hormones, and of course cortisol and aldosterone, which we talked about a little bit with heart problems. So B3, so niacin, niacinamides, of course pantothenic acid, C, folate, all those things are very important in fueling these pathways. As far as our AK perspective, diet is the best treatment for this. We need to get our diet straightened around on our patients. We need to look at food sensitivities. Wheat is they say that wheat is the best thing to start with. That might be true. I have a way of testing. I usually test wheat, dairy, corn, soy, and nightshades, and a few other things, and sort of get in the ballpark. And then I look at diet diaries as well to see what people are actually eating. A lot of times they're off wheat, but they're eating a ton of corn, or maybe a lot more potato type products. So these are things to look at. Once again, you got to fix the stomach. You got to look at the adrenals. It's a central theme. Anyway, anatomy are different components of the body that you want to have pop up in your mind when you're looking at allergies or any kind of digestive issue. The mouth, are people secreting the right amount of enzymes in their mouth? Are they chewing their food? Also, do they have teeth problems? A lot of times, sinus issues or chronic sinusitis is an occult tooth infection. So we want to use our technique of TMJ, which is on the right below there. TMJ and teeth. We want to use our AK evaluation methods to test for neurological tooth and to test for TMJ. Esophagus. The esophagus will tighten when a person is under chronic stress, and it will pull the stomach up against the esophageal hiatus, and this causes like a pseudo-hiatal hernia. This can certainly impact how the stomach digests proteins and ionizes minerals. We look at the stomach. We look at we look at hypochlorhydria. And then, of course, duodenum, the first, 12, 14 inches of duodenum is primarily full of Brunner's glands that are alkalizing the acidic chyme leaving from the stomach. The common bile duct junctions with the small intestine about 14 inches distal. So it isn't right at the, it's not just right at the pyloric sphincter. Of course, the liver, we have to look at for if there's a liver, some kind of liver toxicity, very important. Bile flow is essential for liver function and for proper utilization of fats. Also, bile is a powerful antioxidant. So the different parts of the small intestine, jejunum, ileum, ICV, colon, and of course the pelvic floor is important. Sometimes there's the prolonged congested colon can cause, along with other things, it can cause the pelvic floor to just get weak. And a lot of times in sedentary people, the actual strength of the pelvic floor gets weak. And that, of course, has an effect on how well the colon is able to move with peristalsis, and how well supported the colon is, the distal colon. A toxic colon is constantly going to be recycling toxins back through the liver and back into the general circulation. So, looking first at the stomach, Chapman's reflex, great place to muscle test. And of course, the stomach, the great pectoralis major clavicular is a great muscle to use, providing it's strong in the clear for to test these reflexes. Riddler's reflex is along the edge of the left rib cage, would be just about, on most people, about 1.5 inches left of midline, right on the edge, and it'll be very, very tender when people have stomach acid problems. Hydrochloric acid, of course, is zinc. The pathway for making HCl is zinc dependent as well as B6 dependent. And you know, a lot of our neck muscles, our neck flexors and SCM are all related to the stomach organ, and the nutrition for those muscles is going to be B6. Hiatal hernia, either a pseudohiatal hernia, like esophageal jamming, or a true structural hiatal hernia. These are very big problems that need to be corrected. They're structural problems that can interfere with digestion and hence create an environment that created a situation where allergies can be developed. Cranial fixations. Remember, temporal bulge is related to the to hypochlorhydria and to the bilateral pectoralis major clavicular. That's one of our sort of package deals in AK. So when you see a bilaterally weak pectoralis major clavicular that strengthens to a half breath in, that's a temporal bulge, and that's also associated with low HCl. Remember, the vagus nerve has a tremendous influence on the stomach, diaphragm, small intestine, and proximal 2/3 of the large intestine. So anything cranial can potentially affect the cranial nerves that are leaving the cranium, like the vagus, or like the accessory, or like the glossopharyngeal that sends branches outside of the skull. And of course, cervical subluxations. Stomach is earth element, stomach and spleen, of course. So when we look at emotions, think earth element type emotions, if you're familiar with NET and some of these other systems that look at the 5-element approach to emotions. Earth element emotions in NET are things like stubbornness and ego, pride. So moving on to the liver, the hydrochloric acid function, or the acidity of the chyme leaving the stomach, is an important component of gallbladder contraction. So gallbladder contraction is triggered by acidity. Certain nutrients with the liver, of course, glutathione, taurine, phosphatidylcholine, are all important for liver detoxification and good bile drainage. Liver and gallbladder are a wood element. So emotions that are to be considered with liver and gallbladder would be wood element emotions like anger and resentment. Remember, liver in Chinese medicine, liver governs the fibers of the body. Thoracic subluxations, mid upper thoracics. In classic chiropractic neurology, the T4, T5, and 6 areas are related to stomach, T5 specifically. In the associated points related to the bladder meridian, T8 and 9, T9, T8, 9, 10 are going to be the associated bladder points for liver. So subluxation or fixation, basically anywhere in the thoracics from T4 to T10, T11 is going to be potentially a major factor. The small intestine, remember the Peyer's patches are throughout the small intestine, not just the proximal duodenum, but Peyer's patches are the sort of brain of the gut immune system that is monitoring the things that are coming in from the outside world and determining if the immune system needs to be on guard or not. Brunner's glands, which are in the proximal duodenum, they secrete an alkaline mucus, which neutralizes the stomach acidity and sets the stage for the pancreatic enzymes and the small intestine's linings and enzymes to do their job. Common bile duct, I often will do a gentle visceral manipulation on the area where the bile duct goes into the small intestine, the sphincter of Oddi, which I think is one of the coolest anatomical names. And then when we're talking about small intestine or anywhere in the gut, we want to use, I think, Chapman's reflexes for small intestine along the rib cage and along the inner thighs are really great areas to use as indicators for nutritional testing, but also can lead you to doing food substance testing, lactose, milk protein, gliadin from gluten, things like that. Now, oral testing, where you actually have the patient sniff the allergen, can be a little risky if they're highly allergic, as well as lingual, of course, if you actually give them the food that they've been reacting to. So even though that's considered the accepted proper way and official way of testing substances in AK, be very cautious with that. Now, energetic testing, which is done by a lot of AK practitioners, which still isn't considered quite as reliable, but you avoid exposing people to the substance that may give them a reaction. And a lot of people in AK use, so I've used a lot of different kits over the years, but what I find that works the best for me are the homeopathic vials. And you can get these through Dr. Leibowitz's. If you call Dr. Leibowitz, his office, they can help you get these kits. And they have homeopathic vials for everything imaginable that could, parasites, food toxins, bacteria, funguses, all kinds of things. So vagus nerve, once again, so check cranials, thoracic and upper lumbar innervation to the small intestine. Small intestine, like the heart, like the pericardium, like the triple warmer meridians, are all fire element. So fire element emotions. And of course, vitamin D, the classic AK correlating nutrient to try. Ileocecal valve, huge player. Often it is the main display of what's going on in behind the scenes. It's a great place to access problems in the gut. Open ICV, more common. There's going to be toxicity, and the nutrients that are going to be helpful are things like chlorophyll, probiotics, of course vitamin D as well. Open ICV is a result of too little tone in the nervous system. So, and then also the subluxation C3 and its Lovett L3 are often found. Closed ICV, not as common. calcium, like really fast absorbing calcium, like cal-lactate from Standard Process, is really helpful at relaxing the overall tone in the body, so that the closed ICV can open up. SIBO, all kinds of stuff written on SIBO, but SIBO really can get its start from a chronic open ICV, where the bacterial colonies can leave the colon and establish themselves in the small intestine, where they really don't belong. And then emotions. With chronic ICV, always look at emotions. Dr. Scott Walker, who originated the neuro-emotional technique, would say, don't let the DAPEs get you: diet, allergies, parasites, emotions. And of course, the colon's involved in all kinds of things: detoxification, absorption, elimination, and there's also synthesis of things like vitamin K. Depends on who you read now. There's over 700 different strains of bacteria in the colon. It's believed that we have up to maybe 40 trillion microorganisms that live in and on us now. We have about 30 trillion of our own cells, depending on who you read. This comes from a fairly recent study done, I think came out of Sweden. But nonetheless, the bulk of those bacteria are in the colon. So I do a lot of visceral manipulation on ICV, as well as the colon and the liver. I don't do colonics. I sometimes will recommend people get colonics. I think they can be very helpful as a jump start. I mean, they're only a short-term fix unless you rearrange the diet and fix the patient's stuff. Sacral plexus, there's sacral innervation to the lower colon. The upper part of the colon still has vagal, so craniosacral. A lot of times when people are having trouble with constipation, there's a lack of proper craniosacral rhythm that needs to be reestablished. So we look at sacral inspiration, expiration. We look at all the different cranial faults. Liver and lung, of course, are metal elements. So you're going to have metal element emotions related to liver problems. So the next segment is going to be on emotions.